The Retro Fighters Mantis is a tiny wireless PS4 controller that packs in a number of additional features over a regular DualShock 4. Like many of Retro Fighters' controllers, there's plenty of things I like about it, and also like many of their controllers, there's a few things I don't. Fundamentally, it does what it advertises it does. I think the biggest problem with it though, is that I'm not entirely sure who it's for. On one hand, its tiny form factor and playful aesthetic makes it look like a cute shrunken toy. But on the other hand, it includes features that you'd normally only see on controllers aimed at the competitive crowd. I can't figure out if this is a niche that Retro Fighters have cleverly cornered, or if it's a hodgepodge of design elements that ultimately aren't a good fit for anyone. So how about this? I'll explain what it does, and you can figure out if it's the right fit for your needs. This product was sent to me by Retro Fighters to review, but as always, all opinions are my own. The Mantis officially works with the PS4, PC, and Android devices. It'll also work with the PS5 when playing PS4 games. Unfortunately, although it uses a Bluetooth connection, it doesn't connect to the Switch or Switch 2. This exclusively uses a Bluetooth connection, and the wireless range is quoted at 30 feet or roughly 9 meters. It includes all the standard features of an official DualShock 4, minus the extension port and the headphone jack. This makes it fully compatible with the PS4's library of games. Beyond this, it has 2 paddles on the back that can be mapped to most of the standard buttons. What you can't map are the touchpad, or the options, share, or the PS button. It doesn't support any kind of macros either. It has trigger stops too, which allow you to set them to be long pull or short pull triggers. Additionally, there's a switch to easily toggle between direct input and X input. Of course, it has Hall effect sticks, and the triggers are Hall effect as well. I feel like we've reached a point where I can probably stop mentioning when something has Hall effect sticks and just point out when they don't. A casualty of the smaller size is battery life. You'll get about 4 to 5 hours per charge. If you want to maximize this, you could disable the vibration, although you'll need to do this via the system settings as you can't turn it off on the controller itself. A feature of most Retro Fighters controllers that I love, and that this has too, is that they hold charge for ages. So if you don't use it for a month or two, it should still power up. Charging is handled by a good old-fashioned USB-C connection, and it takes roughly an hour and a half to charge. If it runs out of power, it can be used in wired mode too. Because it doesn't offer the same level of features that a Pro controller does, this lands it in what I call the semi-pro category, giving you a small amount of customization that you don't get with an official pad. Now, the Mantis is small, maybe even the smallest fully featured wireless PS4 controller out there. At 152mm long, 72mm wide, and 69mm high, it's quite a bit smaller than a DualShock 4. Unfortunately, this has resulted in a less ergonomic form factor, at least anecdotally. I have reasonably small hands too, so if you've struggled with small controllers in the past, this isn't likely to be any better. The main issue is there just isn't a lot to hold on to. This shape is reminiscent of controllers from the early 90s, and I found when using the sticks I wanted something more substantial. You could argue that this is a moot point though, because why would you buy a tiny controller if you need something bigger? Surprisingly though, the layout of the buttons and sticks isn't bad. The sticks are actually spaced about the same distance apart as an OEM pad, so for games that use them, it feels pretty good, apart from there not being enough to hold on to. It has pretty big triggers too, bigger than the original pads, and although the R1 and R2 bumpers are skinnier, they work well in practice. The front-facing buttons have quite a lot of travel distance compared to an official pad. I haven't found this to be problematic though, they're still responsive, but I figured it was worth pointing out as some people really take issue with this. Now, the buttons are packed quite tightly together. This layout is common with most of Retro Fighters controllers, although the buttons are smaller than some of their other pads, so this does slightly mitigate the issue of accidentally pressing adjacent buttons. The touchpad is also teeny weeny, although given that there's not a huge number of games that utilize it, beyond it being an additional button, it's probably not going to be a big deal, unless you need maximum control over the wind in Ghost of Tsushima. Now, the D-pad is a slight improvement over some of Retro Fighters' other pads like the Defender, but I still think it's the weakest component. The Mantis' D-pad is more mushy than I'd like, and it doesn't have a pronounced pivot point, meaning you can press it all the way down in the center, and this creates some issues. I play a lot of fighting games, and it's an okay solution for that, but I found it less useful for 2D games, especially run and gun games like Blazing Chrome, where needing to point in a specific direction is critical. With the Mantis, this is a real struggle. Sometimes even being able to point straight forward is problematic. And for this reason, it's completely unusable in Code Veronica. This is me trying to run in a straight line. It's impossible. It simply won't register up without adding in an erroneous left or right input. I know this is a bit of an edge case, the number of games that use tank controls these days isn't exactly massive, but yeah, don't bite to play classic Resident Evil. Running a quick test shows just how imprecise the D-pad is. Getting a single direction input is rare. At least half the time you're getting input from one of the adjacent directions. I also did a polling test. The Mantis isn't advertised as having a high polling rate, but just out of interest, I clocked it at 125Hz in wide X input mode. Unfortunately, I have no data on the Bluetooth connection, but it's unlikely to be higher than that. On a positive note about the compact size is that it's easy to chuck in a bag or even a pocket if your pants are baggy enough. So if you need something to travel with, this is a practical solution. It's light, although not as light as you might expect. At 180 grams, it only weighs about 20 grams less than a DualShock 4, and honestly, that's a good thing. A bit of heft, especially in a controller with rumble, helps it feel substantial. Now, I was expecting the rumble to be less powerful, simply because it theoretically would have smaller, less powerful motors. That definitely isn't the case. This thing has really powerful rumble, so impressive that I reckon it might have a significant impact on battery life. Long story short, if you like powerful rumble, the Mantis won't disappoint. Pairing it is a straightforward process, as is mapping and unmapping the paddles. This is all done on the controller, it doesn't have a companion app. It will save your button mappings, although it doesn't support saved presets, meaning you'll need to remap the paddles every time you want to have a different setup for a different game. Finally, it also comes in this grey colour if you don't love the transparent look. Now, I need to disclose that the first controller I was sent for review was faulty. It would constantly freeze up and get stuck on the last input. So, for example, if I was holding left on the D-pad, it would get stuck holding left and not accept any other inputs, and it needed to be completely powered off to fix this. I haven't seen this reported elsewhere, so I don't believe it's a widespread issue, but I did think I should mention it. Retro Fighters were super helpful in trying to debug the problem too, so if you're having problems with any of their products, definitely reach out to them. The Mantis definitely does what it advertises on the box, and as usual, I can't find fault with the build quality. In practice though, I reckon it's probably too small for most people to be something you'd use as a main controller, or to gain a competitive edge. As a backup or second controller, it's also kind of overkill, because learning to use the paddles takes time, making it a superfluous feature for that use case. With all of that said though, if you need something compact with some extra functionality for traveling, or maybe you have tiny hands, then the Mantis is a solid little pad for playing 3D games.